Well, here comes the Italiano. Bobbity boopy.
Bobbity boopy. Bibbity boopity bobbity bobbity.
Bobbity bobbity bo That is messed up. But welcome back, folks. Today we'll cover the initial stats for the Italian medium tank line coming in patch 1.01. Now only tiers 1 through 7 have been leaked. The higher tiers are yet to be revealed. And I think it's kind of murky how Wargaming is going to choose the candidates for the high tier Italian medium tanks. Because in 1943, Italy surrendered. And afterwards, their tank development progress or departments completely ceased to exist. So they have no tank developments after World War II. And they basically used tanks from any other NATO countries like M47 Patton or the Leopard 1 until they get their own C1 Ariete, which is like modern day main battle tank, like a Challenger 1 or a Challenger 2. It's not going to happen at tier 10, that's for sure. So it's kind of murky, but it is projected to happen in World of Tanks patch 1.01. So that means in patch 1.0, we're going to get the M35, the Projecto M35 model 1946. Basically the Frankenstein stitched pseudo tank that Wargaming made up. But here is the tech tree. So initially at low tiers, all these vehicles did get made. So these were manufactured and saw service. But until you get to tier 5, that's the model tank. So it's a model, only existed as the model, never actually built or a prototype. This is the paper tank, upgrade to the paper or model. And another paper tank, upgrade to the paper tank, upgrade to the paper tank. So these never actually existed. They planned on building it, but Italy surrendered. And later on, these are yet to be announced. And I'm guessing it could be something like stitched pseudo tank, like the Projecto M35. But it could also be something like a Leopard 1 using the auto reloading system. And that would be it. So the whole line looks somewhat like the Czechoslovakians. Yeah, basically boring until you get to the high tiers. And that's the new mechanics. And that's it. Alright, but I'll put a timestamp into the description below to skip towards different tiers, because usually people skip the lower tiers with free XP. I would do that myself, so I'll try to run through everything, but it is a slog because wall of text and wall of stats. So let's get to it. But here is tier 1. We have the Fiat 3000. So it is basically based off of the Renault 17 FT17, but it is like a duck-ish. So the FT17 is pretty revolutionary, so that's why this vehicle was based off of the French design, but it has a smaller ass, it has a better engine power, and better horsepower per ton ratio, and a better 37mm gun. And that was the key characteristic, but here is the lineup. So this is the Fiat 3000. It has a smaller ass in the back. This is the Renault FT17. A little bit bigger ass in the back. This is the first French tank called the Schneider CA1. CA-1. So it is like the French version of the Mark tank, or the German version of the A7V. So that's the French version of the first tank they have. And this thing, the box with the nipple, this is the Fiat 2000. Yeah, it has like 6 machine guns and 1 65mm for the top, but it has no armor, and it has like 7 horsepower per ton ratio, and it's super slow. So we're not going to get this thing, but that's what it looks like, the Fiat 2000. So in the game, this vehicle is basically looks like the FT. It's not bad design, but it is tier 1, so it is free. There's a dent. Uh-oh. Alright, that's pretty nice. You put a dent. a hole there, alright. Well, it's more than a dent, it's like a can opening of the vehicle, but as a 37mm, it should have one machine gun attached to this thing. Yeah, coaxial, but I like how they put more stuff onto the tier 1s, like cloth and stuff, and a shovel. Alright, you don't have to do it, because usually people just skip. Like 100 free XP, they skip. So here are the main stats posted on the forums of the EU server, but it's bare bones, mostly. But here are the main stats. So penetration is rather high for a tier 1, same goes for the alpha. DPM is kinda low, usually it's about 1100. Accuracy, pretty decent, 0.42 for tier 1, yeah, usually it's like 0.5 or something. Aim time, relatively fast as well, 10 degrees of gun depression, 20 elevation. Traverse is pretty good for the hull and for the turret. So this hull traverse, 50 degrees per second, that's pretty decent. Terrain resistance and the horsepower per ton ratio, not bad for a tier 1. Back then, tier 1s are like tractors, so alright, that's not bad, but top speed of 21 kilometers per hour, so it's not going anywhere fast, but it does rev up decently. Has 120 health, view range below average, meh, it's a free tank, weighs about 6 tons, alright, but yeah, this gun, it's mostly about the punching power, the penetration, and the alpha. DPM is a little bit rough, but this should have no problem penetrating any tier 2s that it will see. So the maximum matchmaking is tier 2. T18 is gone. Sad day, but 39mm, is it good enough? Well, the main problem for tier 1s is the French. It's the H35 and the R35, and those have 45mm of armor. So this might be a problem, but you could spam gold in a tier 1, but yeah, H35, R35, those are the nuts. So let's take a quick look at tier 1 meta. I don't play low tiers, but H35, R35, French heavy tanks, quote unquote. These are light tanks, but fudge, they have a lot of armor. So 40mm, alright, I thought it was 45, but yeah, penetration wise, you will have some problem with these French vehicles. And the H35, oh, 40, I thought it was 45, but you do have a weak spot for the Hotchkiss H35. Anyways, you'll do alright, it's a tier 1. We spend enough time talking about tier 1 meta. At tier 2, we have 2 tanks, one light and one medium. This is the light tank, the L6/40. So this is Italian designed, but it basically has a autocannon, a 20mm, has about 40mm at best. So it's not that bad armor wise, but it's still 2-person, so it's a little bit small. Top speed of 42 historically, and 11.67 tons to a horsepower per ton ratio. So, alright. Here are the in-game model. So, it looks a little bit wider than the Fiat 3000. A little bit better, comfortable, roomy for the driver and the commander. But it's still a tractor, so alright. I do like the snow effect for the winter maps in 1.0, because you get these snow particles on your tank and you can wash it off if you drive into a lake. Interesting, huh? There's a pickaxe for your prospecting needs. Alright. But yeah, it's not a bad looking little tank, but like all low tiers, everybody just skips them. So, okay. There's no shovel. Well, you do get a pickaxe. So, alright. But here are the initial stats. And here are the main stats. So, it's an autocannon. It's a Hotchkiss. It's not Hotchkiss. Oh, it's a Breda. Alright, 20 cal. Alright. Penetration is about the same as the 37mm. It has a pretty decent horsepower per ton now. So 15.61 compared to the historical 11-ish. But DPM is a little bit better. I think, than the 37, but low alpha, autocannon, as well as the accuracy, but faster aim, above average health, and view range. 320 for a tier 2? Not bad. It does not see tier 4 because low tier matchmaking, but cost 3,000 credits. Okay, so yeah, nothing to really talk about. Low tier meta. So the other tank is the medium, the M1441. So this is also built in Italy, and it is one of the workhorse for the Italians in the North African campaign, but has the 47mm and a bunch of machine guns on it as well. Crew of 4, so this is considered as a medium. But pause the video if you want to read through the wall of text and stats. But this is the Breda 8mm machine gun that they like to use and cramp onto the vehicle. There are a lot of them. Also, notice the water dryage or water soakingness of the tank. So that's a special effect in World of Tanks 1.0, which is pretty nice. Here it is, dry from the sun. Alright, stop talking. So it's not bad looking tractor, I guess, but low tier, tier 2. No shovel, huh? But you do have a machine gun. Alright. So, yada yada. Nice detail on the suspension. Is that... what kind of suspension is that? My suspension is not that great, but kind of looks like a bogey system. A bunch of springs. So here's the shovel. Here's the railway spike to stab people with. If you get like in an emergency situation, go stab people. Initial stats. But here are the main stats. So penetration is not bad for a tier 2. 52mm. You'll punch through the French pretty reliably with 52mm of pen. Accuracy is also not as bad. So gun depression as well. Not as much view range. Yeah. It's a tier 2. It's a little bit slow. And the best armor is only 30 at the front. So yeah, try to keep your front towards stuff like the Panzer 1C. And you should be fine. But yeah, if they shoot the sides, you'll get chewed down by the Panzer 1Cs. So mostly for my low tier matchmaking and meta, it's tier 2. Tier 2 is the French with the armor, so you have to defeat that, you're fine. Tier 3 is the Panzer 1C, so if you can't avoid Panzer 1Cs or just bounce their auto cannons, the Mauser machine gun, you'll be fine. And tier 4 is the Matilda, basically, and the Valentine 2. So that's all the seal clubbing vehicles that I could think of if I was going to seal club. At tier 3, we have the M1542. So similar to upgraded version of the M14. So a little bit better armor, a little bit bigger gun, more machine guns, and a little bit better engine, basically. But it is built, it was built, and it does saw action. So there's no HD model of the skin, so that's the basic mesh model. But yeah, it's a little bit bigger of a turret with the basket in the back. No machine gun. Breda. No machine guns. No shovel. A lot of fuel tanks. That's good. And railway spike to stab people with. Alright. Why is there HD model for the preview on the initial stats, but not for the actual model? What? That doesn't make sense. So penetration for a tier 3, 70mm. That's not bad, and this vehicle will not see tier 5. So recent change to the matchmaking 6 months ago, but yeah, tier 3s will never see tier 5s. So 70mm of pen, not bad. I mean, if it's like 80, that would be great, but the main problem for tier 3 against tier 4 is the Matilda or the Valentine 2. This vehicle should not have that much problem against the Valentine 2 because the Valentine has 60 to 65mm of armor, but the king heavy tank of tier 4, it's the Matilda. So yeah, this thing facing a Matilda with about 45 millimeters of armor at the front. Yeah, the Matilda is going to punch you to death and just rapid fire you to death. But DPM is not that bad. Accuracy, aim time, okay. Horsepower per turn ratio is high, and terrain resistance also not that bad. Health, view range, below average. Alright, but it's not a bad gun against any other vehicles, but usually the seal clipping tanks are the French at tier 2, Panzer 1C at tier 3, and the Matilda at tier 4, with the Valentine 2, but that's what I use. I don't like to seal club, but if you're going to, those are it. So at tier 4, we have the Italian T-34 as of the tank. So it's a P-26. So this was based off of a captured T-34 supplied by the Germans. So they designed this vehicle out of it, and this is their iconic tank. So small fun history, but the Italians classify it as a heavy. Don't know why, but it is mostly because they want this to be the infantry tank supporting the cruiser tanks. So the cruiser tanks are like the M14, the M15 that you saw at tier 2 and tier 3, but this is the big daddy in their lineup. So this is like their Churchill 1 supporting the cruiser tanks, the Crusaders and stuff. But that's their combat tactics. Yeah. So visually, it's a lot better looking than the lower tiers. Obviously, it has a larger gun, so that's good. But yeah, iconic tank for the Italians. That's their T-32 or Sherman or Panzer IV. But yep, looks a lot like a mesh of a German-esque, Russian-esque based development. Shows how much I know about tank developments. Terrible. But this drive wheel looks huge. Alright. But here are the initial stats. And here are the main stats. So 97mm of pen for tier 4. Not bad. And 110 alpha. That's good. And DPM is also pretty decent. So yeah, it's punching pretty heavily with this gun. And it's not a bad caliber because it's a 75. It's a 75mm L34 on a tier 4. Yeah, that's pretty high caliber, big caliber. Jeez, it's like a tier 5 gun on a tier 4. But yeah, it's a lot better than the snub nose 75mm on the douchebag wagon number 2 or the Panzer 3J, I think. So it's a lot better than German counterpart based on the penetration, but accuracy below average, aim time not that bad, 10 degrees of gun depression, traverse is also pretty decent, terrain resistance and horsepower per turn ratio is below average, but it's still consistent with the vehicles before it. So 15 is not that bad. Average health, view range, below average. So it will see tier 6. It's a tier 4, but it costs 150,000 credits for a tier 4 now? Jeez. It's kind of a lot. Alright. Well, main competition, Matilda, but you have no problem against the Matilda's armor with standard shell. So that's good, but how much health does the Matilda have? Like 350, 370? So the main problem of tier 4 meta, it's the Matilda. It's always been the Matilda. Matilda is one of the best heavy tank, even though it's a medium. So 370, yep, I was right, but yeah, Matilda has crazy penetration. For a tier 4, that's absurdly good. But it's rapid fire, so it doesn't have that much alpha. So yeah, alpha is good, but play this thing aggressively if you can, or wolf pack. So you should play it as a medium, not as a heavy. But low tier meta. Alright, so tier 5, paper tank. So the P-43 is a tank project based in the middle of 1940s, but when Italy surrendered, everything was thrown away, mostly. So this tank was compared to early prototypes of the Panther, so they want to have a small Panther-esque of a medium. But here is the lineup. So originally, this is the P-43, the middle, or this is the P-43, this is the P-26 right here. So this is the tank before it, which was built and mass-produced, but this is compared to the Panther, so they want to have a larger P-26 with a little bit more armor, a little bit better gun and engine power, but they never built it, so they want to compare it to a smaller Panther tank. That's the idea behind it, but never built. So that's the lineup. Basically, the P-26 and the P-43 were developed at the same time, and they never made the P-43. So visually, they don't have the actual skin, but it's a block, so it looks a little bit like a small Panther-esque of a tank. It looks like the Panzer III-4 at tier 5 as well. And what is surprising is this vehicle has 80mm of armor at the front, sloped. So it's close to the Panther as well. But yeah, armor on this thing, not bad. But afterwards, I thought about the Panzer III-4. And the Panzer III-4 is a lot faster than this vehicle. So penetration, slightly above average. DPM is below average. Accuracy, it's alright, but it's not great. This thing cannot shoot on the move. Has 10 degrees of gun depression, that's alright. Only 14.32 horsepower per ton ratio. And only 42 km per hour top speed. Turn resistance is good. Health is below average. View range below average. Now, what I mean by comparing this vehicle to the Panzer III-4 is I thought this vehicle could be good. But then again, I thought about the Panzer III-4, and the Panzer III-4 has like 23 horsepower per ton ratio with the same amount of armor, not on the turret though. So that's the drawback of the Panzer III-4, but here it is. It has 23.33 horsepower per ton ratio, better top speed, same terrain resistance, better DPM, better accuracy, same view range. The only difference is this turret, only 50mm at the front, whereas for the P-43, it's 80mm. So I think 50mm is about the same as 80 compared to other tier 5s, because they usually have 100mm of pen, so it's both flat, and therefore pretty much if you can pen 100mm, 80 equals 50, because they basically always overmatch your armor anyways. So why not have more engine power and horsepower per ton ratio? 23 to 14, that's pretty huge of a difference. So I mean, the Panzer III-4 is also not that bad too. 80mm at the front, 60 for the beak. If you angle it, yeah, this could defeat like 75mm guns, 76mm guns quite reliably. So we do have a lot more engine power and horsepower per ton ratio and top speed. So that's what I thought about it. But also disappointingly, this thing does not carry a 105, even though on paper they were considerations of a 105 and a 90mm, and this leads to the tier 6, which is basically upgraded version of the P-43. There were 2 upgrade versions, and surprisingly, Wargaming is going to put 1 upgrade at tier 6 and 1 upgrade at tier 7. It's all the same tank. It's all the same tank. So basically, they want to have a 90mm with a little bit better armoring sloping on the vehicle, but the same engine as on the tier 5. So that's what they want, but it's still a model, so they only built a model, but wooden model. I think this is a fancier model, but it's not like real scale. It's like 1/10 of the actual scale, but they do have the metal plating and other stuff. So it kind of looks real, but it's a smaller figurine. Alright, but no actual texture for the real model in the game. So it's a little bit more flat. It's a little bit better in terms of the angling on the frontal hull. It's more smoother of a plate, but it's still 80 millimeters of armor. It has a larger gun. It has a 90 millimeter now, not a 75, but here are the main stats. So Alpha, yeah, it's a 90 millimeter, obviously. So packs a little bit more punch, but the accuracy, the dispersion, penetration, yeah, all wonky. Horsepower per ton ratio, about 14, so it's not that fast for medium. Terrain resistance, only good for the hard, and for the medium and the soft, not that great. Health below average, so if you will get one-shotted pretty reliably by ISUs and SU-152s and Armato Borsigs with the 150. So I mean, for vehicles like the EZ8, they have 750, which sometimes does not get one-shotted by the ISU based on the RNG, but this 710, they will probably get one-shotted, mostly. So 90mm gun, you can also put the 75 from the tier 5, the normal version of the P43, but yeah, why not just play a Jackson? Yeah, I think a Jackson could be a lot better than a medium in this scenario, but this penetration, well, it's a 90mm at tier 6. Is it worth all the trouble to have a 90mm at tier 6, but the counterbalance is you have crappy gun handling and only 8 degrees of gun depression, and it's not as fast? Well, I don't know, but doesn't seem too crazy, right? I mean, DPM is good, but consider the fact that the EZ8 has like 2200 DPM. If you're going to play this thing in a tournament, 1 versus 1 tournament, EZ8 is going to chew you out. They just fire Gold Shell, and that would negate your 80mm of armor. Alright, but I mean, if you're using gold against tier 8, oh my god, it's scary to think that 180mm of pen for the Gold Shell, it's not even close to defeating stuff like the Chrysler K or the 252U or even the IS-6 for that matter. Normal IS-6 has like 185mm effective, and yeah, that's funny. That's real funny. So finally at tier 7, it is the 3rd version of the P43, modified a bunch of times, so a little bit longer barrel of a 90mm, better engine, about the same armor as well, a little bit better. 100mm should be a little bit better, but it's a paper tank, so they want to have the 90mm L53, but they never actually put this gun onto this vehicle, so there were no actual model of the tank. They did use this gun on a tank destroyer called the Simovete, which is basically a large gun on a M14/41, the tier 2. Yeah, the tier 2, except larger, elongated, and they also used it on a truck, the Lancia truck, to shoot down aircrafts, but they never did have an actual model of the tank with this long of a gun. But yeah, that's paper tank number 2, actually number 3 if you think about it. But it does look like a small leopard tank, so it's a little bit more aerodynamic in terms of visual design. It does look like torsion bar suspension now. Could be the same as the bogey system, but my suspension knowledge is not that great. But yeah, it does look a lot more modern than the tractors beforehand, so that's good. But it's still 100mm. It's a little bit sloped for the turret, and alright sloped for the hull, but it's at tier 7. And this gun, 152mm of pin, it's like playing a T20 of a tank with a 90mm, but accuracy 0.403, aim time 2.4, dispersion crap. I mean, you do have pretty decent engine power to horsepower per ton ratio as well, but this gun, so you do have to go flanking all the time. This pen, rough. It has less DPM than the tier 6 beforehand, but obviously the T20 has less DPM than the E8 as well, than the EZ8. Also, the gold shell is not that great, so if you're facing like a tier 9, like the VK4502P OSB, get wrecked. So, well, let's take a look at the T20. Also, I think all the vehicles are somewhat similar to the German counterpart, the VK30 series for the Daimler-Benz. That's the D series of the VKs 30s. We'll talk about that, but American T20, blah blah blah, it's about the same. Better pin, less DPM, better accuracy, better dispersion? Yeah, better dispersion. 0.211, that's garbage. That's bad. So what you want is like 0.11 something. That's pretty good. If it's 0.09, that's amazing. So 0.2, that's pretty rough. So it's about the same as the T20. T20 has more view range, so you could go scouting if you want, but T20 does not have 100mm of armor. It has only 63. So armor wise, depends on the sloping, but 100mm at tier 7 means nothing unless you're shooting like tier 5s or tier 6. But if it's top tier, I think this tank could be amazing based on the armor, but it's mostly against mediums or light tanks. If you're facing tank destroyers or heavy tanks at tier 6, they'll probably pin this armor. So I wouldn't put too much effort or too much faith in this armor. It's only 100mm, and other tanks at 100mm at tier 7 is the Tiger 1. So Tiger 1 has a lot of health to compensate, and a lot of DPM and penetration as well. So that's the power of the gun, but this thing doesn't have accuracy, doesn't have penetration. Dispersion is also kind of crap. So basically, after reviewing all these vehicles, they're kind of like the VK30 series, the Dirty Ton series by the Daimler-Benz, not by the MAN or the Henschel versions. But taking a look back, why not just play this line, the line that leads to the Leopard 1? So taking a look, at tier 5, you have the Panzer III-4, which is, as I showed you, a little bit better in terms of horsepower per ton ratio, 23-14 than the P43, and the armor is relatively about the same, 80mm at the front. Turret is not as good, 50 compared to 80, but it's about, this thing is a lot faster. A lot faster. At tier 6, we have the upgraded P43 BIS compared to the VK3001D. It doesn't have a 90mm, but this thing also has penetration and accuracy and DPM with it, as well as the mobility, whereas the P43 BIS doesn't have that much horsepower per ton ratio, only 14.46. Yeah, that's not great. It does have a 90mm gun, but the rest of the stats, not great. And at tier 7, we have the 3002D, which also has a pretty good horsepower per ton ratio, but you don't need to have a 90mm. You could use the 88. It still has crappy penetration but better accuracy, better dispersion, a little bit better DPM as well. So more health than the TUR version. So yeah, why not just play the VK30 series? Alright, but that's what I thought. But yeah, all these tanks doesn't seem to be that eye-catching or appealing. That's a good term. Yeah, that's what I mean. But thinking on it, at least one of the vehicles in the Czechoslovakian line was decent, was interesting, and that was a Skoda T25 with the autoloader. Because you played that thing and people underestimate the burst damage of this vehicle. The rest of these vehicles suck. TVP VTU, garbage. T34-100, garbage. Skoda T24, whatever, average. These just bleh. So the only vehicle that was interesting was the Skoda T25 with the autoloader. It has a 3-round clip. It bursts damage 330 really quickly. So accuracy was also not that bad. It had 21.46 horsepower per ton ratio. So this vehicle was pretty exciting to play. It was fun. Low tier autoloaders are really scary if you play them well because of the burst damage. And this thing reloads pretty quick. Like reload time, 7.6 seconds for a 3-round clip. That's amazing. So even though DPM sucks, even though the penetration, the alpha also sucks, as was the accuracy, this thing reloads 7.6 seconds for 3 rounds. It takes like 1.3 seconds between each shot. Yeah, that's nuts. So yeah, this is the exciting vehicle out of the Czechoslovakian line. Whereas for the Italians, okay. So doesn't have as much of a gun choice as the Germans. So the Germans get a 105mm derp, as well as a few choices of the 75s and with the 88s, but you have to use the 90mm, and that's it. I think you have to use the 90mm on the TUR version. Yeah, you have to use the 90. You cannot use the 75 for the tier 7. Could you use the 76 for the T20 if you don't like to play with the 90mm? Gun choice. That's important. Yeah, you could use a derp gun. You could use a 76 on the T20 if you feel like it, but for the Italians, you have to use a 90. So, gun choice, not that much. Aesthetically, only the tier 7 looks pretty decent, as well as the P26 at tier 5, but you compare that to the Panzer III-4. Panzer III-4 looks a lot better. So aesthetically, it's German-esque based on the design, obviously, but lower tiers seems to have above average penetration, which is good. So middle tiers are more focused on alpha. So basically, that's the punchiness of the gun, but the whole tech line, biggest drawback is accuracy and shooting dispersion on the move. Shell velocity is also pretty slow for the high caliber guns. So going back to the stuff, 758 meters per second shell velocity, that's slow. Same goes for the tier 6 version, 700. So that's slower than the Object 268 initially with the 152 back then, but it's like lobbing a shot with the 700 meters per second shell velocity. So yeah, accuracy, shooting dispersion, shell velocity, you have to get close with these vehicles. I mean, some of them don't have that much horsepower per ton ratio, like 20, so usually they have like 15. Yeah, you have to get close. So should you get excited about this line? I wouldn't, but it would be hilariously lazy of a method of adding vehicles to the higher tiers if you have the Panther with the auto reloader and the M47 with the auto reloader and then the Leopard 1, and that's it. There was a licensed version of the Panther tank for the Italians, but they never built it. It's called the Panthera, but yeah, Panther at tier 8, Patton at tier 9, Leopard 1 at tier 10. There you go, with the auto reloader. Hey, reuse assets. So there you go, folks. Italian medium tanks, quickly summarized. Sorry about the skip or the pause between each sentence because I was thinking, and holy crap, there's not that much like special vehicle out of the whole tech line. Like, you could find 1 or 2 exciting vehicles out of the Czechs, out of the Chinese tank destroyers, like the WZ-131 GFT at tier 6. That's interesting. Or maybe the WZ or the T-34-2 GFT, whatever the stuff. But all these vehicles, nothing really stands out, appeals to me as a good tank. All seem average or mediocre, disappointingly. But there you go, folks. My initial opinion about these tanks, the initial Italian medium tanks, tier 1 through 7. I would like to see the tier 8 through 10. That would be really interesting if Wargaming is going to stitch up a little bit more vehicles like the Projecto M35, basically taking different parts and putting them together. And that's a tank, a pseudo tank, but whatever. But thank you guys for watching this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.
So now